Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Good morning and welcome to Encounter. I'm your host today. My name is Joe Sellepack. I'm the Executive Director at the Broome County Council of Churches. In Acts 17, the Apostle Paul was brought before a group of people in the Areopagus in Athens, and he was trying to communicate to them the essence of the Christian faith. When he looked around, he saw that these people were very religious, and so he makes note of their religious proclivities. And then he sees an altar, and the altar is to an unknown God. And then he says, I want to make this God known to you. And then he says, this God is the one in whom we move and have our being. He's quoting a secular poet at that point. It's kind of interesting how the Apostle Paul used symbols and ideas that were very, very prominent to the Athenians in order to communicate to them the essence of his faith. And it seems that we within the Christian church have been doing this for a long time. If it's not looking around and seeing a symbol of faith, we're making our own symbols. So we have crosses, we have baptismal fonts, we have artwork, and these things are supposed to communicate something to the audience, and the audience reads it and they know something about it, and then they use that as a way of, we use that as a way of trying to talk to them about what our faith is. And this has been going on for a long time, and whether it's storytelling or whether it's artwork or whether it's poetry, we tend to use these things as a way of trying to talk about the essence of our faith. Well, today we have with us a guest. His name is Jeff Kellam. Jeff is a media minister. He has been with the Presbyterian Church for a number of years and served churches in the Southern Tier as well as in the Geneva Conference.
In Virginia first, and then up in Vermont, and then I came down to Trumansburg. So that was my New York State parish.
New York State parish was in Trumansburg, and media ministry has been a part of your calling.
Yeah, I was headed toward the ministry as early as 9th grade. I was going to Jenny S. Knapp School, took a vocations survey, and ministry was number 3, I think, on my list. And after my science and math grades plummeted, so I went to Westminster College in Pennsylvania and was going to major in religion, philosophy, and psychology, and then I discovered the radio station. And as a kid growing up in the Southern Tier, listening to WNBF, WINR, WENE, and watching the remotes come to town where they'd be on site doing their shows, to be able to do my own show at the college station was very exciting. Then Richard Stevens one day, who was the advisor of the radio station, said, "Have you ever thought about combining your interest in radio with your interest in pastoral work?" And I said, no, and I realized I had listened to some religious radio at that time, and we're talking now the mid-1960s. And I thought, no way in the world am I going to get into that thing. It was, at that time, full of charlatans and people raising money and selling health food for Jesus. And so I thought, no, why would I do that? Then I went to a conference where I heard the first Stan Freberg spots that my denomination had produced. These were groundbreaking. The name Stan Freberg is not well known these days, but he's still alive. At that time, he was a comedian, a satirist. He was big into advertising. He was selling Chungking chow mein as if it were a Ford 450 horsepower, engine. So very creative, and somehow he and the Presbyterian Church got together and came up with these spots. And I realized, as I was thinking about coming on today, that it was 50 years ago. It was, I think, 1964 that these spots first came out. So I brought some of them with me, as well as some other spots that our denominations have done in their national offices in order to look at the Areopagus, if you want, or to look at the idols that are being worshipped to the unknown gods. And some of our idols today are the shopping mall, the gun, politics,
Facebook,
video games. Yeah,
Video
it's things
games.
that. What is of ultimate worth to you? And
Right.
we realize that for a lot of people, these are the things of ultimate worth.
And where do we move and have our being? I mean, the same basic question that Paul was raising at that time is what we're kind of dealing with now. Is where do we move and where do we have our being, and how do we communicate the essence of faith to people who move in different ways?
Yep.
And so it sounds like Feinberg was thinking in the same lines as Paul was, right?
Sure. Stan Freberg was one who, in a very creative way, but with a great deal of humor, could look at the things that were important to people and say, remember, there's something of more ultimate significance than the altar at which you are currently worshiping. So can we play one now?
Sure.
Let's play that first spot that I heard, and as I frame it, I have to say that prior to this, back in those days, the religious radio spot was Barney Big Voice putting on his best stained glass voice over organ music or a choir humming, saying, "You too can lift your life at the church of your choice this Sunday." And it went on, and it was boring, and that was the end of that. So on comes Freberg, and we'll listen to this spot.
Well, I can't this Sunday. I'm playing golf, and the following Sunday I promised to take the kids to the beach. Man's got to spend some time with his kids, you know.
Yeah, sure.
Besides, we seem to get along just fine without church. You know, it's up to the individual. Gee, look at the time. I got to run. But anyhow, we'll trot along to church one of these days.
Well, how about 2 weeks from Sunday?
Oh, I never planned that far ahead. 2 weeks, the whole world could blow up by then.
That's right.
Where'd you get the idea you could make it all by yourself? Doesn't it get a little lonely sometimes out on that limb without him? It's a great life, but it could be greater. Why try and go it alone? The blessings you lose may be your own.
The preceding was presented by the United Presbyterian Church.
I don't know about you, Jeff, but I just think that Jackie Gleason's about to come on the show right now.
Well, and that was very popular in 1964 when this spot aired. But the jingle, even, no one expected a jingle on a religious spot.
Right.
So you've got Freberg, that wonderful voice that says, "That's right." And then on comes Freberg's own, he had his own voices. He worked with Billy May's big band with some of the things that he did. And that thing that says, where'd you get the idea you could make it all by yourself?
Right.
Doesn't it get a little lonely sometimes out on that limb without him? And then he says, it's a great life, but it could be greater. Why try to go it alone? And then he does a takeoff on the old National Safety Council spot that said, the life you save may be your own, by saying the blessings you lose may be your own.
Exactly.
And then on comes the stinger at the end. Well, they played these things in Chicago just as a test market. And something like 75% of the people they surveyed on the street had said, oh yeah, I heard those spots, they're really good. Well, nobody had ever said that about a religious spot before. So again, we're talking 1964, some time ago.
Well, and it's so interesting that the same issues that the character is dealing with in that spot are some of the same altars using the word, the golf.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're out on a golf course on a Sunday morning,
Right.
and the question, well, we're doing just fine without religion.
Yeah.
And so it seems that the issues haven't necessarily changed that much.
That's right.
Have they?
And that's both something for the church to comment on and for the church to take responsibility for. We've been around for 50 years and these things are still going on, that we haven't made much progress on that.
Well, and it seems to me that one of the other thing is, you're only like at the end, the world could collapse in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't think that far ahead. Well, and then that whole humorous bit at the end. Well, that's my point, you know. And it seems like you know the idea that we're only one heart attack short, one thing away from having our world come crashing down, and then at that point, what do you cling to?
Yeah, both personally and globally, this can happen. You know, with the conflagration in the Middle East, with issues of my personal life or yours. Just in a moment's time, something can change.
And if we're only grounded or rooted within like Facebook or Twitter or whatever the local the pop culture is kind of communicating to us, if that's it, we find out how thin that is at certain times in our life, and we really do need depth. I mean, if we're going to go to war in Iraq, or if we're experience a Cuban Missile Crisis, or what do you cling to in the middle of your world being turned upside down?
I hadn't thought about the missile crisis when the spot came out. Of course, we were in the Cold War, but the nuclear threat was hanging over us. Let's go on the next spot, which becomes more personal and is just as contemporary when you start thinking about the idea that any person could be laid off at almost any time. This is the second in the series of Freeburg spots. They came on the same disc when they were sent to radio stations, so let's listen to that one.
Look, I'm quite self-sufficient. I made myself what I am, thank you.
But don't you think all of us occasionally could use a little divine
Gee, I gotta run. Here's my card anyhow. I'm a vice president now.
Well, good.
Yes, indeed.
But your name, it's just penciled in here.
Well, there's a big turnover in personnel. You know how it is.
Uh-huh. Well, that's just about how it is in life, isn't it?
Pardon?
We're all just penciled in.
Where'd you get the idea you could make it all by yourself? Doesn't it get a little lonely sometimes out on that limb without him? It's a great life, but it could be greater. Why try and go it alone? The blessings you lose may be your own.
The preceding was presented by the United Presbyterian Church.
So we're all just penciled in.
Yeah,
right?
right. And I don't think it's a threat. I think it's not saying you could go anytime. It's really just saying life is full of temporary things, and if you're looking for stability, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And I think that's one of those things that probably the world could use right now, and either in the comedic form of Stan Freeburg or in some other way as well.
Well, and it really does show, well, if you think about it, how flippant we are. I mean, it seems that every year you have a new fad. So what do you cling to? A Sony PlayStation? Or do you wait in line? Do you wait in line for the Sony PlayStation, or perhaps there are other values that are more pertinent to a person's life, like faith, like family, like all kinds of things. There's so many ways that you could take that spot.
Yeah. The other spot that came out at the same time was a full jingle with it was a minute long instead of the 30-second jingle that we heard there. I'm not sure that one got the play that the other two did. Interestingly, Freeburg came back several years later and did